Hey guys! Today I have something extremely exciting for you. One of the very best, most incredible interviews that I've ever participated in order to celebrate Netflix's Masters of the Universe revelation. I was lucky enough to chat with the one and only Kevin Smith. If you guys know me, you know I'm a massive comic book nerd. So to get the chance to speak with him it was absolutely amazing. Now, the reason I've waited so long to share this full interview is because, well, we dive into some serious spoilers of this show, especially this part one of the show. So excited for part two to be coming out. I need more. The way they ended on that cliffhanger, it's killing me. But this thing is it is so good. I've watched it multiple times. I absolutely love it. But it was exciting to pick Kevin's brain and talk about everything that went into this show. And the best part is it is so very obvious just from his face and the things that he says. I mean, he loves this. He put his heart and soul into this. And that's what I love. I love seeing how passionate he is about this show about Masters of the Universe. Is just absolutely incredible. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Again, it is filled with spoilers, so be careful. If you do not want spoilers going into the show, which is out on Netflix now, go ahead and watch the show and come back and then watch this interview. It is a bit long too. He's very long-winded. He gets some really amazing information out there. I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. If this is your first time here, I'd love it if you take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoy the content, go ahead and hit that notification bell. Hey, Tessa from Mama's Geeky here. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel. Hey, Kevin, it's Tessa with mamasgeeky.com. And
How are you?
Love the show.
Thank you. Oh my God, that means the world, man.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So this picks up after the 80s series. So can you tell me the decision process for that?
It was not even my decision. That's the job presented to me was we're doing, Mattel met with me and they're like, we're doing 3 Masters of the Universe things. One is a live action movie. One is a reinvention of He-Man, the Masters of the Universe cartoon for kids, this kind of CG version. And he said there's a middle version, which is meant to be like kind of a fan service for everyone who loved the old show. And he's like, so we think you might be good for that. And their idea was the movie takes it in a new direction. The kids cartoon takes it in a new direction. They didn't want people who grew up watching the show to be like, this ain't my He-Man. I don't recognize any of this. So they're like, we want to do one strictly for those people. And that was primarily for our boss, Ted Biaselli, who works at Netflix. He's the biggest Masters of the Universe fan on the planet. He's like, I love Batman. I love Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, Star Wars, but Motu was my religion. Motu short for Masters of the Universe. So, you know, he spearheaded this. He was the guy who got all this going, man. I think he was the one that brought it into Netflix. And that was the version they were saying, hey, we think you'd be good for this. And, you know, thank God that was the version they wanted, because if they wanted me to do to He-Man what Nicole did to She-Ra, I would not have been that person. I'm not inventive. I'm not creative, and I can't take a concept and turn it into something cool and new. But they asked me to just continue the story. They're like, the idea is we're going to spiritually sequelize the classic series. So I was like, wait, you just want to keep it going and maybe grow them up a little bit? I was like, I'm your guy. I could kind of totally do that. I've done that in comic books. I think I could pull that off. So I felt pretty good about taking the job. I felt excellent the moment I realized that the 2 people on either side of me, Ted at Netflix and Rob David at Mattel Television, Rob had written like Masters of the Universe comics for DC. So not only is he like a suit who works at Mattel, he's a creative as well. I knew I wasn't going to go wrong between the Scylla and Charybdis of these guys. They weren't going to crush me, but I knew I wasn't going to go wrong because they could tell me what a super fan would or would not bump into. You know, so constantly with Teddy, I'm like, what if we did this? Like, you know, if everybody's seen it now, I don't want to spoil it, but like we kill one character twice and he's a pretty big character. And, you know, most people would be like, don't do that. But Ted, being a super fan, was like, I know where it's going. I like it. Do it. And it wasn't like break it all, because this dude ain't interested in breaking it all. He's still got his original toys like set up around his house. So the idea going in was we were given parameters that were never like suffocating. They were the parameters that allowed me to take the job. It was just creative enough where I was like, I would love to take these characters and just grow them up a little bit. That was the idea. Our marching orders, it was kind of like this. We were like, look, we want the person to watch this show to feel like when they sit down, they're like, oh shit, all my old toys are exactly where I left them. And they look the same, and the relationships are the same. Everything about it's the same, but I'm a little more grown up, and they could be a little more grown up too. We got to bring stakes to it, which is something, of course, they were never able to do with Filmation. You know, like, I don't think He-Man ever punched Skeletor or used a sword on him. They weren't allowed to do violence and stuff. So it wasn't just as simple as Ted being like, I want to see him fight. Naturally, that's a part of it and stuff. But it was like, what if these characters, you know, who blithely kind of had very simple adventures and morality tales episode after episode daily. What if, you know, their entire world was kind of confronted with stakes? Like Teddy goes, I used to watch this show, and like I would think that Skeletor was going to kill He-Man every episode. He's going, then I became a teenager and realized that was never going to happen. He's going, but just, I would love to feel that way again. He's like, if you can make me feel like stakes, odds, like somebody who could die at any minute. He's going, I feel like that would really go the distance. And that was like, you know, candy to a baby. Cause I'm like, you mean we get to like kill characters too? I mean, that's like the easiest street and drama. You want to you go wring a motherfucker's heart in your hands, kill somebody in media. Oh, you could, and especially with some, I mean, we've all seen it now, but like we got a character in the show who, when we were, I guess I could say it, don't matter. We've all seen it. Orko. When we were like talking about Orko, you know, in the writer's room, as we were kind of building, the idea was like Orko, basically a hated character. Like 75% of the audience had no time for him, hated that he would show up and make corny jokes and shit like that. So our marching orders, I was like, well, what if we can make that character beloved? Like, what if we can make people absolutely fall in love with Orko, with our incarnation of Orko? And then just when they fucking love him, we take him away, you know, just to see what happens and shit. And so we got to play like that. And every one of those decisions, like I would bump it off of Rob or Teddy, man. And so no time ever was there ever a moment where they're like, don't do that. That no idea was ever kicked back. Now, to be fair, I didn't play the game I normally play where it's like, all right, this motherfucker's going to make sex jokes. This motherfucker's going to be like cursing. Like I had to leave some of the tools that I'm used to playing with back in my toolbox. But what was great is I've been consuming shit like this my whole life. Comic books, cartoons, sci-fi movies. I never make them. I make movies where people talk to each other about stupid shit. I don't play in this arena. I'm more of an audience member for this kind of thing. But just, I've been an audience member for 50 years now. I'm going to be 51 in fucking August. So I've been a member of the audience for a long time. That means I've seen a lot of TV. I've seen a lot of movies. I've seen like how it's done. So even though I'd never done something like this before, I was like, well, I'm going to just do what like my favorite things did. Like going forward with this, we were essentially doing Marvel Cinematic Universe method. Like I said, look, when I go see a Marvel movie, it is my childhood served back to me, but in such an appetizing way that even though I know exactly whatever flavor is and at every component, I'm still gobbling it up. And not only that, I'm going to bring my kid to sit there with me and be like, see this shit? I grew up on this. This is my childhood. That's what my father did with me, man. When I was a kid, we went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, and nobody knew about the movie. You didn't have the internet back then, so there was no like pre-release hype. It was a very quiet release and stuff. And for some, you know, my old man took me to the movies every Wednesday to a matinee, pulled me out of Catholic school. And I have to tell him all the time, like, a relative died. They're like, you got a lot of dead relatives. And then we go to the matinees. So we went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I got to see a version of my father I've never seen before in my life up to that point. Up to that point, that's dad. You know, he's stoic and he's in charge and he's got to go to work and pay the bills and shit like that. He's dad. That day when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark with him, I saw somebody completely different because this was a piece of his childhood. He was excitedly telling me, he's like, you don't understand. When I was a kid going to the movies, this is what they did. And then you had to make you come back the next week to see the end of it. It was called Cliffhanger. I can't believe this. I got to see a version of my father that I absolutely fell in love with. I'd always loved my dad, but he was my dad. I got to see the boy that he was, his passions, the thing that like fueled him when he was a kid. And he shared that with me. And it shaped my view of my father. It shaped my view of entertainment. Like, this is what he likes. I should like this too. Maybe there's something worthy here or whatnot. And I want that for everyone else. Like, I want that as we were writing this, we're like, somebody's going to be sitting down with their kid and watching this, and they are going to be breathlessly retelling every element of the Masters of the Universe lore that they could possibly remember. And they remember it all because it was built into their DNA at a time when they were kids. That shit takes hold. So we knew we were making it for a fan service audience, but we also knew they were bringing their kids with them. And we wanted to make sure that that was going to be an equally enjoyable experience for both. Not the kid. We don't want kids being like, fuck, what is this? We wanted kids to be engaged because their parents are engaged, and also because hopefully they find the story interesting and stuff. But for me, like, the notion of, like, I watched WandaVision with my wife and she didn't give a fuck about Marvel and shit. But here we were in the middle of the pandemic and she's like, look, I'll watch anything. And so I'm like, well, this is good. Like, this character is real fucking dope. And if this is what I think it is, this shit's about grief, man. And it's going to be amazing. And so she starts watching it with me, and I discovered the joy of secondary storytelling. Like, I'm a person who receives storytelling in the audience. I like what a story's told to me. I watch TV, movies, plays, whatever the fuck. I'm happy to consume it and shit. But when you get into something that you are an expert at, like, you know this shit backwards and forwards, you get to be a part of the storytelling in a way that you never were before, because you're sitting there with somebody going like, what's going on? And you're like, pause, let me fucking tell you what happened. And like, I'm going to recount 9 movies to you just so you can understand this one point. And then you are part of the storytelling. You didn't pay for this movie. You didn't have to get yourself in shape like Chris Hemsworth to be on camera in this movie. But suddenly you are part of the storytelling tradition of this movie. And I wanted that so badly for Masters. I hope it happens.
I think you accomplished it. So
thank you.
Okay, so I love the show, and I was a fan of the original, but 80s cartoons were really big into secret identities. Like, every story was about, like, this person can't know. What if they find out? But they get revealed a little bit here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for that. That was my way in as much as I've been a long time comic book fan. Even before I watched He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in the early 80s, you know, I was a comic book kid, and the secret identity is at the core of every great superhero. Like, this is the person everyone sees me as. This is the person that I truly am. It's aspirative. That's why kids love it, man. It's like, you mean I could be somebody else? Like, I'm treated like a kid, but I could be treated like this. And that's at the heart of the ethos of He-Man himself. If you've ever watched like The Toys That Made Us on Netflix, they do a great job of telling you where this all came from, man. And it was like a bunch of old men sitting around a room going, what do kids want? And they're like, kids want power. And so suddenly this thing came to be. So secret identities, like, are big. That was part of the draw for me, because to me, like, I didn't know if I could tell a proper He-Man and the Masters of the Universe story, but I knew I could tell a superhero story. And to me, I was like, oh, this is Superman. This is Clark Kent and Superman. There's a dual identity. And Lois Lane don't know that he's Superman, and yet they're friends, and she pines for Superman and stuff. I was like, this is a classic storytelling element that's been at play heavily in a medium that I love for years and years. So secret identities were my way in. And the idea of this show, like when we were like in the writer's room, and even before that, when they were like, what's your idea? I kind of latched onto in the opening credits, just like in our opening title sequence, they're very clear about like, only some people know the secret that Prince Adam is He-Man. And the one person really left out of it, aside from like his parents, is Teela, who like He-Man literally fights beside for every episode. And if he's not He-Man, he's Adam. Teela is protecting him as Prince Adam in every episode. And so to me, I'm like, the most important person in his life doesn't know his secret. What happens if she finds out? Like, what happens if she finds out at the worst time possible? Like when the dude can't even answer for himself anymore. It's not a case of like, sit down, I got to tell you something. You know, He-Man, I'm him. It's basically, she's going to find out under traumatic circumstances where she has to like balance how she feels about how she felt about Adam and He-Man, and then how she feels about them now, knowing that she was like at the heart of deception. So that was the thing I pitched, and that's what Netflix and Mattel Television went for right away. They were like, ooh. So for me, I was like, it's kind of doing the story of if Lois finds out that Clark was Superman after Superman died. how heartbroken she would be, what kind of effect that would have. And so it trickled on from that in a world where in episode 1, He-Man and Skeletor get killed, presumably. It was also telling a story about what happens when you take the two figureheads, the two people around which the entire world has been built, the two people who are at the epicenter, the people that drive the motivation of every single episode of the show. What happens if you pull them out? Like, what happens to the rest of the characters? What happens to Metropolis if Superman goes away? What happens to Gotham City if Batman is no more? So that was kind of the way in for us, but it had everything to do with secret identities. And that was for me the draw. I was like, ooh, I love this. Is a comic book story.
Hey, Kevin. So you've accomplished your goal. I have a 6-year-old here, and we love the show.
Did the kid like it too?
Oh, absolutely. We love it. I've seen it in our household. We've seen it 3 times in its entirety, all the way through. 3 times the show. It's amazing. It's phenomenal.
You're gonna make me cry, man.
Yeah, and then me and my best friend, we've known each other for 30 years. We also watched together because we had this experience with He-Man together. So we were geeking out originally with everything together. But the one question I did have, you immediately hooked me in when I saw Triclops and Motherboard. Like when you guys had Triclops in there, I was all on board. But Merman, played by Kevin Conroy, and then you have Skeletor, played by Mark Hamill. How did that all come together? Because that's such an iconic moment, seeing them on the same side too.
I know, it's so weird. And it's weird hearing them voice at each other, but not in the roles that you're used to them doing. Mark, of course, was one of the first people we thought about for Skeletor, but he was real pie in the sky. Like, I don't know if we'll get him. Like, they asked me, they're like, you know him, you worked with him. I was like, I did, but I said, just recently, I made Jay and Silent Bob reboot, and I asked him to come be in it, and he couldn't do it because he was making some star fucking thing. So I don't know that I'm your ticket to getting Mark. The ticket to getting Mark was just saying Skeletor, because Mark had this affection going back to not when he was a child, but when he had children. So Mark tells a story about, like, in December 81 or 82, he's like, I spent 1 month calling every Mattel exec on the planet to try to secure Castle Grayskull for my kid. So for him, there was nostalgic connection to the material, even if he didn't watch every episode. And also, he was just like, the chance to play Skeletor, like one of the most famous bad guys in all history, in all of media history. And he was talking about slowing down, if not stopping, voiceover work. And he said, he's like, when they offered me Skeletor, like, I had to go for it and stuff. So getting him was great. And, you know, part of it was like, oh, I know Kevin and stuff. And I like to think in my heart of hearts that he was like, well, I couldn't do reboot, so I'll do this, you know, or something. Like, I owe him, but I doubt it's that. I really think it had to do with the fact that Mark loves to chew the scenery, and Skeletor is very dramatic. Like, you get to do the Joker to the 10th degree. So getting him was wonderful. And then once we had him, as we were casting, like, we had Merman, and I was like, what if we got Batman to play Merman? And I know Kevin very well. I've had him on our podcast, Fat Man on Batman. He was in Yoga Hosers as well, in a bit part and stuff. So we reached out, and he was like, oh my God, I'd absolutely love to. So being able to bring those two dudes together, you know, on our set, so to speak, that's just fanboy stuff. Fangirl stuff if you're a woman, but in my case, fanboy stuff where you're like, oh my God, like, Batman the animated series, not even really part of my childhood as much as a part of my adulthood. By the time it aired, I was kind of heading toward adulthood and stuff like that. But, you know, I remain a big fan of this stuff, and being able to, like, have the bragging rights of, like, you know, or be a bar question of, like, name the only other cartoon where Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill play opposite one another, you know, that to me, like, I don't do shit for the money. I don't do shit to win awards. Like, I do shit for weird Easter eggs and bragging rights like that. And like, to be a trivia question based on smart casting would be a dream come true. But working with those guys again, both of whom I'd worked with before, I tended to bring a lot of people in. Like, I'd worked with Diedrich Bader before. I'd worked with Tiffany before. I'd worked with Chris before, Stephen Root, you know, a lot of folks, Jason Mewes, I think I've worked with him in the past. So, you know, generally I was like, hey man, we're having a show, we're putting on a show, it's a cartoon, you guys want to play? And nobody said no. Like, everybody dove in for different reasons, but most of it came from people being like, I have some sentimental or nostalgic connection to this material. Either I watched it or is a big part of my kids' lives.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching it 3 times. Fuck, that's awesome.
I didn't let him watch that 5th episode though. He has to watch that on Netflix when it comes out live. He's not gonna watch that 5th episode with me though.
It's going to blow people's minds. People are going to we were always wondering, are people going to be mad? I think they're going to be mad, not because of what we did, but because we don't have an episode after that. Like, that's what's going to irritate people. Like, you son of a bitch, you can't go out like that. But that's how they do. They do that in movies. I've been going to movies my whole life. And when they're doing a series of shit, the fucking one movie ends on a cliffhanger. And so you got to go back. So I was like, I'm going to steal that formula. It's not, I didn't invent anything. I just borrowed from everybody.
First, Kevin, congratulations on the series. I've been tracking your excitement from the moment it was announced. So for you, I think we're all excited for just how well it's turned out. One question with 2 little mini parts to it. Yeah. Once the work got underway, was there ever a moment in it early on where you paused and had one of those, oh shit, I'm really, really doing this and continuing the story? And along those lines, in that production, was there ever a moment where you sat back and went, yeah, I think we might just be getting this?
There, honestly, even now, I still don't know if we got it, because that's all predicated on the audience, right? It's like, there's how you feel about the work, and then there's how you feel about the work after everyone consumes the work. So, if you talked to me before Yoga Hosers came out, I'd be like, oh, best movie I ever made. And then after the world told me what it was, I was like, well, perhaps it was not. So I can't say even now that I'm like, oh man, we nailed it. But I know this much. I've been watching this shit obsessively since they've been sending me things. I mean, I wrote the story, wrote scripts, and then saw the animatics, saw the finished animation, saw the animation with Bear's amazing score involved, recorded the voices. So I was there every step of the way. And many times, I get up it sounds ridiculous, but on brand, but I generally get up around 4:20 every day. And so there were days where I didn't have things to do. I wasn't writing my own project or something. The few times where I had free time, instead of surfing the internet, I would literally just go back and rewatch the episodes. And like, when you make a movie, you watch it over and over and over again. And then by the time it's ready to come out, you're like, I'm done seeing it. This I could watch over and over and over again. It just grabbed me like emotionally, like every time. I like the key moments, the key deaths still make me cry. And I came up with them. I know they're coming, but it doesn't matter. Like, for me, it's dream come true stuff to watch the smallest, weakest character, the character that most people are like, face down the Lord of Hell. Like, there's a shot where fucking like Scareglow unleashes all these fucking demons. And like, it's intimidating as fuck to look at, even in animation. And there's Orko, like, does the spin forward and like fucking busts his circle at him and shit. And that to me is the heart of heroism. I've been reading this shit since I was a kid, not just Masters of the Universe, but comic books, superheroes, because of that notion. The notion that like in the moment that the worst thing in the world is happening, that everybody is running from, there's one or a couple people dressed in very colorful costumes heading straight at it. And that's the moment we gave like Orko. And so stuff like that, like when I saw that, like, even when in script form, like coming up with that beat, I was like, oh, that's gonna be great. Tim wrote that script, seeing it written out, like how it played out, like, oh my God, it's breathtaking. Hearing Griffin record it, and Griffin is like a secret weapon and a half. He does that voice without any help. He don't process it or anything. Griffin Newman, who plays our Orko, he wanted the role so badly, and thank God he got it. Like, he lobbied for it on Twitter. He brought insane amounts of soul to it. He sounds like the guy. And there's this beautiful side thing where like the guy, Lou Scheimer used to do the voice of Orko for the original cartoon back in the day, but he'd record it and they'd put him through filters and shit. Griffin could just do the voice. Like, he didn't put through filter. He just like put it on. So if somebody's like, hey, this is Orko, and a kid's like, do it, he could fucking do it and shit. So moments like that where I was like, oh my God, like, I love it. Like, and when you love something a lot, it'll power you through, because, I've made some shit people don't love. And as long as you love it, it'll get you where you need to go. Like I always say to myself at the end of every project, generally 2 things, and whether they succeed or fail, and in my case, most of the time, this is after failure, I say, you wanted this. Oh my God, you wanted this. You changed life so that this could happen. You looked for millions of dollars and you got people to change their schedules and come to a place to make pretend for you. You wanted this, so don't fucking sell out on it. Because I remember when Mallrats tanked when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I turned my back on the movie for a while. Now Mallrats is like my most beloved movie. So I learned early on, like fucking like, just because it don't work in the moment, don't mean it won't work in the future. The second thing I always say to myself after I'm done with something is like, what was the alternative? What were you gonna do? If you didn't do this fucking thing, it'd eat at you like a cancer because you know you could pull it off. Same thing here with Masters of the Universe. If I hadn't done it, even though I'd never done sort of this exact thing before, I've done versions of it. I've done some episodic. I've done some fantasy storytelling with like Dogma. I've done comic books and stuff, but putting them all together in one place, I'd never done it. But I felt like if I could just hit key moments, like as long as I'm happy, as long as I feel like that's a beautiful fucking story, then I could kind of deal with it. The nice thing is when other people start reacting to it, like all day long, I've been hearing from people who actually see it. And you are the people we've been thinking about. We don't know what you look like, but for the last 2 years, we designed it for use, for user friendly, to be user friendly, fan service, that it would be something that would be embraced. We didn't want to challenge the audience and be like, everything you know about fucking He-Man is wrong. Basically, we're like, everything you know about all that shit was absolutely right. This is just what happened the next day, and something bad happened and shit went wrong. But it was, I still to this moment, I don't want to count my chickens. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel pretty good about it. I hope the rest of the world embraces it like I have, like as much as I love it. But I'll be honest with you, I love it so much that even if the rest of the world shit on it, I'd be like, you know what? Then I'm an idiot, because that's the exact story that I wanted to tell. And it still moves me to this day. So we'll see. I guess we'll know if we're successful if we ever get a season 2. But we don't find out about that, they tell us, until they drop it. And then 3 weeks after, they look at the algorithm, and that's when they decide whether something gets re-upped and stuff. So fingers crossed enough people watch it. I mean, that's the sad thing. It's like, even if people hate it, if they watch it, we'll probably get a season 2. And then I could be like, let me repair all the shit I did wrong that you didn't like. Hopefully.
Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I love the series as well. I wasn't the biggest He-Man fan, but now I'm a lot more invested after watching the series.
That's good. That's good. That's a good sign. Thank you.
Yeah. So you were talking a little bit earlier about Easter eggs, and my favorite Easter eggs from the episodes we got was Wondar. And I was wondering, what's your favorite Easter egg, and how important do you think it is for you and the fans that these Easter eggs are included?
Easter eggs are a big part of our culture, as we all know. Like, it's one thing to enjoy a thing as presented. It's another thing to be able to enjoy the inside baseball of it all. And that's something that my whole career, they always tried to beat out of me. Because, I connected the movies back in the day, and like they're all in the Busch universe. And I remember whoever I worked with, like the studios, whether it be Miramax, Universal, or the Weinstein Company, they were always like, you got to stop putting in references to your other movies and stuff like that. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because only a few people find it funny. The people have seen the other movies. What if you got people in the audience never saw those other movies? And I was like, well, hopefully they'll enjoy the movie we're presenting, but hopefully the people who did enjoy the previous stuff, that shit's, we didn't call it Easter eggs then, but it was like, that shit's in there for them, man. That's to reward them for like, hey man, if you saw that other flick, here's another joke inside this flick. So I've been doing that like for years, but they'd always try to beat it out of me. They were always just like, oh, it's so alienating. Now that's all anybody wants. They want everything connected, man. Everyone's trying to find a way to build like a universe and stuff like that. So as we went into this, there's certain Easter eggs that we were definitely knew that we were going to throw in. Like Rob David, who's our exec at Mattel, who's like, just, it's a shame to call him an exec. That is his job, but he's as creative as any writer or any of the artists who've worked on this. Rob, when I gave him my story, was just like, this is great. All I ask is that you put Preternia in it. And I was like, get out of here. And he was like, we never, like, it's a legendary toy that nobody really got to have. And like, to be able to put it in there would be something special. So we turned Preternia, which in the Mattel lore was like, Eternia of old with dinosaurs in it and shit like that. We turned that into our version of heaven. We turned Subternia into our version of hell. So Preternia like was the first Easter egg. The second Easter egg going in was, of course, Hero. We wanted to do, because this is a character that never got to be in the cartoons. Same with Stinkor, and same with Scareglow. So going into it, we knew there were elements that had been made, like, you know, there's a Scareglow figure, but he was never in the classic cartoon. We knew that bringing those in would be fan servicey moments, and then repurposing Scareglow into our Lord of Hell, so to speak. Like suddenly you take a character that, you know, it doesn't have many parameters because it hadn't been defined in many other incarnations, and you know, you get a bit more freedom with the character and get to use the character that way. So it was. Am I just blabbing? Did I hit it? Did I hit the answer?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Definitely.
Hi, Kevin. I really enjoyed the sequel.
Thank you.
So I realized that while the sequel still has a lot to do with He-Man, it also had a lot to do with female empowerment, especially with Tila and Andre and Evil Lynn. How did you go about making that concept?
The idea going in was like in every episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the heroic warriors who he fought side by side with. And Tila is literally in every episode, as Evil Lynn is literally in every episode. So we didn't feel like, hey man, like we're doing something new. They did something new in the 80s. You know, and Sorceress is one of the most powerful characters in the entire Masters of the Universe and whatnot. So we felt like it was all just sitting there, but when they made the show back in the day, they weren't thinking about adults by any stretch of the imagination. They were thinking about kids. So with us going forward, we were like in this version, this iteration of the story where we take the two big figures, He-Man and Skeletor, and temporarily remove them to see what happens to the world without them. The two people who are most important in their lives are left alone, and we get to see their growth. Like what happens if you're no longer standing side by side with the most powerful man in the universe or the interdimensional demon? Suddenly you can be yourself. Suddenly you can make decisions for yourself. Suddenly you can decide who you want to be. And since like the lore of Masters of the Universe includes He-Man's dual identity and how it was a secret from Tila, that just felt like rich drama, like a rich vein to tap, to be like, she didn't even know. He lied to her. Everyone lied to her. These other people, her dad lied to her. The fucking talking cat lied to her and stuff. So she's been lied to her whole life, and like she's given her whole life to this, to the Eternos, to the palace, to the king and queen. And so that betrayal, we felt like, was like, what a great jump off point for that character, because it's about what happens when the two most powerful figures in that world step out. How is the power gap filled? Who are people if they're not defined by, you know, these huge figures in their lives who are always like, we got to do this. You think about it. You're working for He-Man or working with He-Man or working for Skeletor. You're doing the same job every day. We're going to fight. We got to get Grayskull. We got to get Grayskull. And she risked her life so many times and then finds out that she's been lied to the entire time. And she finds out when the guy dies. He doesn't sit her down and be like, let me tell you something. I've been He-Man this whole time. He dies and she has to find out, and she's broken and betrayed by that. And so she leaves that world behind. That to us was a rich vein to tap. And then conversely, since we were doing that with Tila, we get to do a flip side version with Evil Lynn. She too has lost the figure in her life who gave her direction, who was the person for whom she was a henchman and stuff like that, or henchwoman. And suddenly she's left to her own devices. And her name is Evil Lynn, so naturally she's supposed to be bad and shit, but like, we see her in the first episode, like on a mission, in the second episode, on a mission to save Eternia. Like she's doing something heroic, not something selfish. She's going to help the sorceress, not hurt the sorceress. So without a Skeletor, you get to see her character growth and who she gets to be. And I promise you, as interesting as it was for Evil Lynn in episodes 1 through 5, her story in episodes 6 through 10 is one of my favorite things I've ever been involved with in my life. It is an insanely compelling story about the trauma of abuse, a life of abuse and disregard. Like we really got to go deep with the character while never straying from the roots of like, yeah, this is the show with the talking cat in it. Like it was a balancing act that we were very cognizant of, just because the toys, you know, and the characters, some of them could be very colorful and very goofy, didn't mean that we couldn't approach them with like an adult storyline. And so it was important, like as two characters who, just like He-Man was in and just like Skeletor was in every episode of the classic show, we felt like, what a great way to put him forward, particularly in this instance. And it's only like they get the stage for a few episodes, He-Man comes back, as we saw, but like in those moments, we get to explore some shit with those characters that they never would have done before because they were making kid shows. And in the next 5 episodes, oh my God, like where we get to go with the characters, particularly Evil Lynn. I'll be honest with you, going into this, Ted Biaselli, who I talk about all the time, because he's a fucking rock star. Not because I'm like, he gave me a job, although that was nice. But I'm telling you, I just never meet execs, creative people, like creative execs. I never meet execs in the system who, you can like them as a person, but like, generally speaking, their skills on the job are like, you're not creative. What are you doing? That's going to ruin it and stuff. Teddy is the opposite, man. He was like a co-writer. He was like, Jiminy Cricket. He was there the whole time. But Ted, at one point, like we were chit-chatting, and I was like, who's your favorite character? And he goes, I love Evil Lynn. And I'm like, what? Who? I said, nobody loves Evil Lynn. She's nobody's favorite character. He's like, I've always loved her as a kid. He's going, I think that character's incredible. So our version of Evil Lynn, like, is Ted's ultimate dream of what Evil Lynn was, like insanely articulate, like a mind of her own, trapped in this horrible situation and whatnot. And so, I would make fun of him in the beginning for being like, Evil Lynn's Ted's favorite character. Evil Lynn is now my favorite character based on what we did with her, and certainly based on Lena Headey's performance, which is like off the charts wonderful. We were so nervous when she came in because we were like, do you ask her to do Cersei? Or is she going to be insulted if it's like, can she sound like Cersei? And instead, she gave us something so much more. Like, Cersei was a wonderful character and her performance is great, but Cersei's just pretty much evil all the way through and through. Here, Lena gets to like start as evil and then play all these other nuances. And by the time you get into part 2, if she don't win an award for her performance, there's no justice in this world.
Well, now we have to get a part 2, right? Because we have to. It's so good the way that part 1 ends. Loved it.
You'll definitely get a part 2. Whether you get another season after that, I guess we'll have to see if the algorithm lets us. But I've seen episodes 6 through 10, and I just heard Bear's score for episode 6. He's going into with the studio to record it with the orchestra in a couple weeks and stuff. So it's mind-bendingly good. Episode 6 is absolutely my favorite. It starts off part 2, but it's one of my favorite pieces of media I've ever seen in my life. It feels Star Warsian, like, if I may be so bold.
See, I can't wait, man. I'm about to watch the show all over again.
I know.
You know?
Me too.
You kids come to my house, I'll show you 6 through 10.
All right.
Take you up on that.
One big screen, and you just can't tell anybody.
Right?
All
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
You for your time. All right, guys, isn't Kevin just amazing? I absolutely adore him. I'm a huge fan of all of his work, so it was really incredible to get to spend that time with him talking about a show that I love and I know he loves and he's extremely, extremely passionate about. Let me know your favorite part about the interview down below in the comments. Be sure to give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. I have interviews with some of the voice cast as well, including Sarah Michelle Gellar, Chris Wood. It's on here, so be sure to check that out. Tony Todd. You guys don't want to miss those other interviews. And if you already have seen the show, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments about it. And yeah, be sure to stay tuned for more incredible content. And thanks for taking the time to watch this, guys. Thank you so much to all of my monetary supporters, my members here on YouTube, as well as my patrons. If you haven't joined yet, please consider doing so. We have some really awesome perks, including a monthly Zoom meeting where we get to talk face to face. Thank you again to everyone who supports me.